Welcome to First. I'm Mark Eichman along with Shirley Min and Nichelle Polston. The Delaware Memorial Bridge is the lifeline across the Delaware River, and as one span approaches 50 years old, we visit the bridge to see what the future holds.
The future of the restaurant group founded by Matt Haley seems bright. We'll look at what Sodell Concepts has in store for dining and its charitable efforts.
And it doesn't take much effort to find a picture-perfect view of Delaware. It usually involves the coastline and a bunch of migrating birds. First, your Public Media News Magazine starts now.
Finding money to maintain the nation's aging infrastructure has become a hot-button issue in recent years. But there's one aging icon of transportation infrastructure in Delaware that's been going strong for more than 60 years. In this week's First Look, we visit the Delaware Memorial Bridge to see what it will take to keep the twin spans in good shape. Nearly 18 million toll-paying vehicles crossed the Delaware Memorial Bridge in 2016. That beat the record set in 2015, and 2017 could set another record for the southernmost hard crossing of the Delaware River, joining Delaware and New Jersey. With so many travelers using the bridge, maintaining the decades-old structure requires vigilance.
We have the same problem that everybody else in the country does. We have aging infrastructure. Our two bridges were built in 1951 and 1968, so aging infrastructure requires a lot of time, money, and effort to keep it up to date and keep it running.
On a hot day in mid-August, the Delaware Memorial Bridge was dedicated. It was an exciting day for Delawareans and their neighbors in New Jersey and Maryland. The object they had watched grow from the dream of a Chamber of Commerce director in the 1920s to a sketch on a drafting board to the sixth longest bridge in the world was to be dedicated to the World War II dead of Delaware and New Jersey.
When the first span opened more than 60 years ago, no one could have imagined that the bridge would be as heavily traveled so soon. That's why the second span was built 17 years later. And no one back then could have imagined the technology now used to monitor and maintain the twin span. The Delaware River and Bay Authority recently deployed a new drone that can fly and swim underwater to inspect the bridge. Other new technology is being added to the bridge structure itself. The bridge is only the second in the nation to be retrofitted with a dehumidification system that will reduce corrosion along the main cable supports.
The main cables are made of steel, and the number one problem that we have to prevent on our bridge is we want to prevent corrosion. So the dehumidification project is being installed to protect those main cables from the threat of corrosion and to slow it down almost to a negligible point so the cables hopefully will last for many, many generations.
This scaffolding under the main cables supports workers installing that dehumidification system.
We have, for the last 2 years, had a capital improvement program of almost $100 million, and frankly, you're going to see that for the next 5 to 10 years, the same volume of work.
In addition to that protective system, a new lighting system has been installed and new electronic toll collection equipment is being put in. Those toll lanes provide a critical source of revenue to fund all the maintenance and upgrades at the bridge.
All of our money comes from toll revenues from the bridge, from fees that we charge our customers who ride on the ferries, and landing fees at the airports. We do not use any taxpayer dollars.
The DRBA's maintenance work doesn't stop at the toll plaza either. It stretches about 6 miles along I-295 towards the I-95 interchange. That area is in the middle of a massive overhaul that's caused plenty of delays for drivers.
Although we have almost always maintained 2 travel lanes, the problem is when you have an accident, and we do have accidents once in a while, then you are basically restricting traffic to 1 lane and things back up very quickly.
The 295 project should be done by late 2018. So what's the future hold for the Delaware Memorial Bridge? Non-stop maintenance and more upgrades.
We're seeing a lot more steel work. We're going to have to replace what's called the pin and link system on the bridge coming up this year and next year. And I think in the next, probably 10 to 15 years, you're probably going to see a major redecking of the bridges. That's a huge, very expensive undertaking, very lengthy undertaking. But again, given the age of the bridge, you're going to have to see that.
There's also plans for some added protection in the river.
today's barges and ships are much bigger than they used to be when the bridges were constructed, so we're going to construct an advanced ship collision system that consists of basically some pillars that are anchored in the river, so if a ship should stray off course and hit one of the pillars, it would not damage the bridge. We have a collision protection system on there now, but it was really designed for the vessels of many years ago. But that's a major, probably $40 million plus investment that we're going to have to make in the next few years.
It's all part of the effort to help more than 70,000 drivers that use the bridge every day keep on the move.
The Delaware Memorial Bridge is iconic. It's one of the largest twin spans in the world. Part of our goal is we want to enhance the lifespan of that bridge.
Next year, the second span will celebrate its 50th anniversary, and a big celebration is in the works to mark that milestone. In 2012, the bridge recognized its 1 billionth crossing, and under current traffic patterns, should take another 30 years to celebrate crossing number 2 billion.
A lot of cars. So there's more work to be done on the bridge between now and then?
Yeah, there's the next major project in the next 10-15 years will be the redecking or repaving of the bridge. It's a very expensive, a very time-consuming process that will probably cause some backups for drivers, probably a lot of backups for drivers. But that's really the price you have to pay for maintaining these bridges that are 50, 60 years old.
So then what's the life expectancy then for the bridge?
Well, the bridges will be around a lot longer than you or me, right? Mm-hmm. So the DRBA officials say with upgrades and investments, they expect the Delaware Memorial Bridge to be in business for another 100 years, give or take.
And there's lots of other transportation-related construction projects going on.
Right, it's summer, so 'tis the season for all these projects to be getting a lot of work. So in addition to the bridge, in addition to 295, there's the 301 project is probably the other major project in Delaware going on, connecting 301 to Route 1, just south of the Roth Bridge at the C&D Canal. And as you can see, work is rapidly moving forward on the interchange near the bridge, construction being done simultaneously across the length of the project in 7 separate contracts. So the main line of the new 301 is expected to open December 2018. The complete project expected to finish in June 2019 with a total price tag of about $470 million.
Wow. Okay, thanks so much, Mark. There is a lot of construction going on, to say the least, and I know a lot of people can't wait till it's just all done. So read more on Mark's story at newsworks.org/Delaware. Now we're going to head down Route 1 to Sussex County. The death of Delaware restaurateur Matt Haley was unexpected, and it left many wondering about the future of his culinary empire. But almost 3 years after Haley's death, the company he founded, Sodell Concepts, is thriving and celebrating the opening of its 10th restaurant in southern Delaware. Located on the Coastal Highway, Blue Coast Rehoboth is the 10th restaurant in the Sodell Concepts family. The newest member is a spin-off of Sodell's flagship seafood restaurant in North Bethany of the same name, opened by founder Matt Haley in 2001.
I'm big on nostalgia and I'm big on honoring those that have come before us. So I'm really excited that we could make a place that I feel like Matt would be really happy and he would want to hang out here and he would really look to us and say, you guys did a really good job.
Scott Kammerer took over as CEO 3 years ago after Haley died in India on a humanitarian mission. Many wondered what would happen to the company without Haley, and what about his philanthropic efforts. The longtime friends and business partners met serendipitously on the steps of a church in 1999. Both battled with addiction and were fighting for sobriety. They clicked right away.
But looking back on it, meeting Matt that day really changed the focus and the direction of my life. He helped me be very self-aware and look within myself and try and be a better person and change the way I was looking at the world and doing business.
Together, the business partners opened 7 more restaurants between Lewis and Fenwick Island. The more the business grew, the more they gave back to the community. Haley's good deeds in Delaware and around the world earned him the James Beard Foundation Humanitarian of the Year Award in 2014.
He had incredible dreams and vision, and I had the ability to follow through and carry out things. So we were a good combination in a lot of ways, and Matt always was willing to take chances, and never was one to back down from a fight. And that's one thing that I think this company has really inherited from him.
And that stick-to-itiveness is paying off. What began as a small company preparing 37 dinners on its first night now cranks out 30,000 meals a week in the summertime. Cameron and his team also inherited Haley's penchant for doing good. Sodell Cares was founded in 2015 to continue Haley's mission of helping those in the communities where Sodell Concepts does business. In its 2 years, the nonprofit has given well over $100,000 to local organizations that help kids, the elderly, and those coming out of prison.
I think that we've grown into a company that people can be proud of, that people can be proud of working here. So we spend a lot of time trying to make beautiful, simple food. We spend a lot of time developing the people we work with, and we spend a lot of time trying to make the world a better place. And that's really what the foundation of this company is, and that's the foundation of what Matt really wanted this company to be.
Sodell Concepts has 10 restaurants, a catering company, and a food truck with 1,000 employees on the payroll. Scott Kammerer says he could see his company growing into a regional and national level player in the culinary world, but for now, he's perfectly happy with the 10 restaurants and contributing to the community.
Coming up on First, picture all kinds of birds along the Delaware coast, and you get the idea for our story on wild lands. Then experience these portraits, and you get an idea of how Linda Harris Reynolds works. A new poll out this week shows a slight drop in Governor John Carney's approval ratings and a slight increase in his disapproval ratings. Rob Torno is here to weigh in on that. Hey, Rob.
How you doing?
So let's talk about that.
Let's talk.
In the cartoon, Carney is actually holding the sign upside down.
Yeah, so I wanted to poke fun because we don't normally get polling on a sitting governor in Delaware that often. This is pretty early in his tenure. It's not looking good. As you said, his numbers are down a bit, largely due to the budget fiasco. He just didn't have the the energy, it seemed, to sort of push for the things that he thought were important. He spent too much time maybe having coffee with well-to-do retirees. So, hopefully he'll rebound, and maybe next year the budget process will be able to get more of the things he wanted.
I'm sure this comes as a surprise considering, he always had a high popularity rating, especially as congressman.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Democratic state, and what surprised me the most is this is a guy who spent large part of his lifetime in politics. He's lieutenant governor for 8 years, and it's sort of surprising that he doesn't have the nimbleness maybe to figure out ways to get his agenda done, and he'll have to learn a bit.
Well, the rating is definitely different than Governor Chris Christie.
Yeah, he hasn't closed down Cape Penelope and popped a spot over there, so he's got that going for him, and it's early, it's not terrible. He still has a 50% approval rating among registered voters, so he could improve it.
Okay, well, you guys know him as Rob Torno, and so do we. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Torno. He also does commentary at newsworks.org/Delaware.
Now, there was so much to talk about last week that we have asked Governor John Carney to stick around for another session here on First. Thank you so much for your time.
Good to be with you.
I want to talk about health care. So let's start with what's going on in Washington and sort of if things play out the way they're being proposed, what could that mean for Delaware down the road?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that worries me, and I think most governors across the country, is significant cuts to Medicaid. I look at it, the state of Delaware's own budget. We spend about $800 million out of a $4.1 billion budget on Medicaid. And remember, there's another $800 million because it's basically a 50-50 split that comes from the federal government. A little bit more because there were incentives in the Affordable Care Act for states to expand their Medicaid populations, which is what we did here in the state of Delaware. I think it's also important for people to think about and remember who Medicaid covers. Most people think it's just for health care services for low-income families. It is that, about 53 to 55%. But it also includes services for people with disabilities, about 33%. And then it includes the rest, somewhere around 12%, which is long-term care for people who've exhausted all their assets and then they have to go on Medicaid. So it's a combination of payments for low-income families, people with disabilities, and people in long-term care facilities. So when the federal government cuts the the cost share with states, it's going to require the states to either do something differently, deliver less services, or not reimburse services that are currently being provided. And by the way, I would accept greater flexibility to run more efficiently in Medicaid here in the state of Delaware. But just cutting it tens of billions of dollars over the next 10 years is just not going to be good at the local level, at the state level. And that's what worries me the most, and I think most governors.
Unemployment is down nationwide. It has been low in Delaware for a while, and lower longer than the national trend.
Yeah.
But the perception is still that we're not where we were, or the economy is still weak. What do you attribute to that?
Yeah, to me it's because things have changed so dramatically in our state. You know, I've spent most of my life here. I was born in Claymont, went away to college for a while and came back. But you know, we relied on large corporations for a large percentage of the jobs. I mean, DuPont at one time had, I don't know, 30 or 40,000 employees in our state. And so we know that our economy is much more a small business, innovation, startup economy than it was before. And we're in the process of adapting to that. That's why we presented legislation to create a public-private partnership around the economic development effort, to try to be more on the cutting edge.
That's why you eliminated DEDO?
DEDO, well, we changed it. We didn't
Okay.
eliminate it, and we kept some of those traditional Main Street small business functions within the Department of State, and then we're standing up an agency that would be a partnership with the private sector to try to stay more competitive. That's where we're going to certainly strengthen our economy and create more jobs, as well as address some of the fiscal problems that we have in the state.
So then how would that attract business to the state? Or is
So some of it's growing your own.
Right.
Like the University of Delaware, Delaware State University have to be bigger drivers of economic development. And already we've partnered with the University of Delaware with innovation space out at the old DuPont experimental station, with DuPont, which is merging with Dow and then splitting off into 3 separate companies, with the University of Delaware and the state of Delaware, to help cultivate, you know, new business ideas, innovation with lab space out there. Look, you only need, you know, a few Insights of the World, which is a company now that's growing in Delaware. They got about 500 people there on Augustine Cutoff, and they're building, you know, expanding that facility for another 500. That's 1,000 employees. That's the kind of thing that we hope to cultivate, you know, with this startup space.
Time's winding down, but I want to hit up a couple of things. So legislation was passed to amend the Coastal Zone Act in an effort to bring new heavy industry to the state. You know, have we had any nibbles so far, or is it too soon?
So it is a little too soon, but we were all aware of one of the sites that, you know, and by the way, the amendment to the coastal zone really only dealt with 2% of the overall land in the coastal zone, 14 properties, one of which was the old General Chemical site in Claymont. My next door neighbor worked at that site back in the day, which was completely unutilized and couldn't be put into really productive industrial use because it was not grandfathered in, and it had been abandoned for that use. So this will open that up to additional development. There's a lot of development happening on the other side, industrial development on the other side of the state line in Marcus Hook. And it's just kind of a natural carryover to a property that's not far on this side of the line. And the whole purpose is to create the kind of jobs that we were talking about just a minute ago that people can rely on for a good middle class salary.
Want to go over to Wilmington now and then start with education. You know, you had just announced this new Office of Improvement and Innovation within the Department of Education. What do you hope to accomplish through that office?
So we need to change what's happening in classrooms, educating kids that are growing up in the city of Wilmington, most of which, after the Neighborhood Schools Act passed, go to elementary school in the city. And they're overwhelmingly minority, low-income minority student populations. And we just need to do a better job because they're not reaching third grade with the appropriate reading competency. And if you can't read by third grade, you're not going to be able to learn, you know, read to learn in the rest of your academic career. And that kind of academic failure leads to other kinds of failures in our communities, and we need to strengthen our communities by making what's happening in those schools better and giving those kids better educational opportunities.
Is this office just another name, though, for the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission?
No, this is, there is a lot of really good recommendations that the Wilmington Educational Improvement Commission, so-called WIA, came up with. This is actually, and those things they're systemic, and we're working on those as well in terms of where the district lines are and all of that. But we actually have to change what happens in the classrooms to better prepare teachers and other educational personnel to address some of the unique problems that the poor kids that come from these neighborhoods are experiencing.
Okay, Governor Carney, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Good to see you as always.
Good to be here.
The first state is an important stop-off during shorebird migration. The Delaware Wildlands Conservation partners with multiple stakeholders, including landowners, to protect and preserve natural resources so that shorebirds can always rely on Delaware as a rest stop.
I am Kate Hackett. I'm the Executive Director at Delaware Wildlands, and we are a nonprofit land conservation organization. And what we do is we purchase land, ensure that it never gets developed, and then restore it for wildlife habitat, for bird life, for freshwater wetlands, for reforestation, whatever is the particular need in that location. We were founded in 1961, and the founder wanted to ensure that this beautiful estuary was never ever destroyed by industry, by commercial, by pollution resulting from development. So this is the Roberts Farm. We acquired this property a year and a half ago, and it was a home run for us because this property was originally slated for about 400 homes. So this farm is 1,250 acres, which in a developing state and a rapidly developing southern Newcastle County is really a home run. We don't see tracts this size to protect. So we have all types of bird life that depend on this. Waterfowl, we have shorebirds that are starting to come here, which is really fun for us. Delaware is very well known for our shorebird migration. We're located along something that is called a flyway, and basically that's an interstate highway for birds. And we are now able to manage some of the ponds and some of the impoundments on our property to support not only waterfowl, but to create mud flats that the shorebirds need during this time. And this is our peak migration right now. So they come, they fly along this super interstate, and then they stop here, they land, they rest, they feed in the mud flats, and they continue on to the Arctic where they will breed later this year. And one of the reasons we get shorebirds is because those horseshoe crabs crawl up on the beach and they lay their eggs. Just as the shorebirds are coming through their migration, they stop and the shorebirds will eat the horseshoe crab eggs and beef up, get some of their weight back before they start this or finish this 3,000-mile journey that they're on to their breeding grounds in the Arctic. So what we just saw were 10 or 12 glossy ibis coming out of the marsh, and now we can see some of them flying and starting to rest in the tree. They are migratory birds. And you can see an ibis, or tell an ibis, because it is very dark in color and it has a long curved bill that's used for getting insects out of mud flats. There are two reasons this type of habitat is particularly important. So this type of habitat provides a food source for our bird life, both waterfowl and migratory birds. And if we don't provide that food source, we won't see that wildlife anymore. We won't see those birds, they won't come around. But the other piece is these marshes and freshwater wetlands do the same thing. They're actually like the kidney of the landscape. They are the resource that purifies our water and also provides some level of storm protection. So if we have another Hurricane Sandy that comes to Delaware and hits us this time, if you look at this, this is what it's going to hit instead of the houses that are in a spot. And so we will be able to isolate or buffer some of that development with the marshlands that can store that storm water and protect us. So those two pieces together are really critical to make sure that we protect those marshlands now, but also into the future.
You don't have to rely on Delaware Wildlands to preserve our natural resources. You can help too by participating in citizen science projects where you can collect data for organizations like Delaware Wildlands so they can use it in the future.
Linda Harris Reynolds has been drawing since she was a child. Recently, she found her passion in drawing and painting portraits. She loves working with families or just one-on-one creations. First experience is at her Centerville studio this week.
My name is Linda Harris Reynolds. I have spent most of my career doing either commission portrait work or figurative work. I love working with people. It's really what interests me. There's this picture of me with these huge crayons in my hand at 3 years old in preschool, you know, and that pretty much says a lot about the way I grew up. I always had art with me. I always loved drawing, and I always loved drawing people. I start with sketches, very small sketches, and then I do a sketch to the exact size that I want the final piece to be. I try really hard to break down the image the way I see it, but also to sort of imbue it with a certain sense of motion and life. And I wanted it to sort of have its own heartbeat. I think the concept of portraiture in America right now is, maybe for a lot of people it seems a little archaic. In my opinion, it isn't. And for my clients, it really isn't. It's the experience of having an image created from nothing. Does it have value to actually just be expressing yourself in a direct way? I'm hoping so. Actually most wonderful when I haven't seen the piece for a while. Then I get this amazing sense of completion. I mean, I actually had that joy yesterday picking up some of this artwork because I had done 3 separate portraits for this family and they were hung together for the first time. I saw them together. I can't really explain to you the joy of having those children together on the wall and them look good together, and just, I felt like I was seeing the whole group of them, and it was accurate. It was the way I felt about them. I'm very emotional about my work. I give it everything I've got, for better or worse. You know, that is my life's work. It's a different kind of life. It's not a corporate job. It is just me in a room. Maybe with my model, which is great. For the most part, it's a very internal thing. Just the act of painting makes me happy. I wouldn't have changed it at all. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It makes me feel like I've accomplished something. It relaxes me. I feel like it helps me understand the world better when I'm observing it and then trying to recreate it. I really love doing it. It's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. There's nothing I'd rather be doing than painting.
Linda's work was recently featured in the November-December issue of Fine Art Connoisseur magazine. Linda also teaches classes in her studio, and you can get more information on the classes or Linda's work when you visit her on the web at lindaharrisreynolds.com.
Yep, and 2 stories focusing on Delaware youth next week. First, the organization Teen Sharp. It's helping deserving low-income students get into better colleges. The other is the Wilmington Youth Police Academy. It's back in full swing for another year. We'll check on what type of impact it has.
And we have the best of Delaware from Delaware Today magazine. That is first for this week. We thank you for watching. For Shirley Min and Mark Eichman, I'm Michelle Polston. Have a great week.